Hello and welcome to another special live broadcast as part of our How Green is Scotland investigation. Over the course of this week, we'll be showcasing a joint investigation between the Herald and the Ferret. My name is Jack Aitchison and I'm the live editor at the Herald, and I'm joined by Paul Dobson, a journalist at the Ferret. Now, with all eyes on Glasgow ahead of COP26, we're answering some of the burning questions in Scotland's climate fight. Today, we revealed more than 1,100 habitats and species in Scotland are deemed in poor condition, and we mapped out the dozens of protected areas across the country being damaged by climate change. The full investigation, which is running all this week, is available in print. I'm sure you may have seen the cracking front pages we've had the last couple of days. Or, of course, they're also online for Herald subscribers, who can take up a £2 for 2-month offer at heraldscotland.com/subscribe. And of course, you can also view it on The Ferret, taking up their offer of £3 for 1 month at theferret.scot/subscribe. Now, as I say, I'm joined today by Paul Dobson, a journalist at The Ferret, to talk about today's investigation. Now, Paul, I know that you weren't specifically the author behind these pieces, but I know that you were heavily involved, and of course, you're heavily involved in the work that The Ferret do in general. So perhaps you could just start us off today, tell me a bit about a detail about the first initial story by your colleague, and that was Billy Briggs who wrote the story.
Yeah, so as you say, it's Billy's story, so I'll try and do it justice as well as I can. So basically the headline finding is that climate change is one of a number of factors alongside farming and forestry operations, which are causing severe problems for Scottish nature. So basically research for the piece looked at official figures from Nature Scot, which is the Scottish Government's agency tasked with monitoring and protecting thousands of protected sites across Scotland. And the figures showed that 531 habitats and 603 species in Scotland are in what Nature Scot calls poor condition. We also found that climate change has affected 43 protected sites and 76 natural features. In total, Nature Scot monitors 1,800 protected sites, which are home to 5,460 natural features. Of these, 5,301 were assessed by March 2021. So the proportion of Scotland's natural features in what they call favourable condition, which means they're in good condition essentially, was 78.3% this year. So that's a yearly decline of 0.5% from 2020. It's also a decline by 2.1% from 2016, when the percentage of landscape in a favourable condition peaked at 80.4%.
That's a lot of data that we're taking in there. So if you if anyone watching wasn't able to digest that immediately, we've got some comments going. Whether you're watching this on Facebook, on Twitter, anywhere you're watching it, there should be comments coming right now with links to the pieces that you can go and sort of check out for yourself. This was, I read it this morning actually, and I found some of these findings quite shocking, to be honest. That's just my opinion. And there were sort of several species that we identified, the report identified as being at risk. Can you sort of take me through a few of them? I know that some of them might be shocking to some people and some might not.
Yeah, so obviously that's a lot of data to start off with, but the bottom line is that, this is a really emotive subject, and these are some of Scotland's most iconic species. So among the list that we named in decline are the Scottish wildcat, hedgehogs, capercaillie, and the black grouse. And then as well as that, rising sea temperatures caused by climate change could force white-beaked dolphins out of Scottish waters. So essentially, they like colder climate, colder water. So we're less likely to see them in Scotland in the future due to, temperatures of the sea around us increasing. The long-term decline of Scotland's wildlife was documented in a report in 2019 called The State of Nature, which our research builds upon. It claimed that 1 in 9 species, including kittiwakes and wildcats, was threatened with extinction. We also found that average temperatures in Scotland have increased by nearly 1 degree Celsius, with widespread impacts from that climate change already evident on nature. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, these are beautiful creatures. You were talking dolphins, wildcats, black grouse, really beautiful creatures, and creatures that it's just, it's shocking. So I put my personal opinion across here, but I think the findings here are shocking. That's my opinion. What have an environmental campaigner said about this? I assume very much in line with what I've just said.
Yeah, so the piece includes a big raft of reactions, which I would say echo your thoughts, to be honest. But generally, there's a call for sort of urgent action to combat both climate change and the wildlife crises which are affecting Scotland. So, for example, just a taster, the Scottish Wildlife Trust described climate change as one of the greatest threats facing nature and wildlife. So its head of policy, Douglas Peddle, said that state of Scotland's nature was, which he called our support system, is perilous currently. Meanwhile, sort of bug life, which interests me, I know maybe not the most majestic creatures as the other ones you named, but that does work to protect insect populations, and they said that a number of recent studies have painted a grim picture. So butterflies, moths, bees, wasps, and dung beetles are among the most at risk, along with freshwater insects, including stoneflies, caddisflies, and mayflies. And obviously, without insect life, there is nothing for the bigger animals, the more majestic animals to feed on, and that obviously just cascades through the food chain. So declines in one area affect everywhere else. So yeah, it's right throughout our sort of biodiversity, right throughout our wildlife. There's declines occurring.
Now, I would encourage anyone who is listening, anyone's viewing, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, whether you're viewing on the Herald or the Ferret, send your questions in. If you send a comment, we'll be able to see it. We can pop it up on screen and we can put it to Paul, and we can do our absolute best to answer them. Now, one sort of eye-opening figure that I noticed within the piece was that Scotland ranks 212th out of 240 countries in the Global Index of Integrity of Wildlife Sites. 212th out of 240. That is insane to me. Can you explain a bit about what that means? And ahead of COP26, that's not necessarily a good look for Scotland to have.
No, yeah, so exactly. It was quite a shocking figure. Scotland's not normally ranked that low in these kind of tables, but basically the index is a global index which says that Scotland and the UK has retained over half of its biodiversity over the past decade. For comparison, the figure is 65% in France, 67% in Germany, and 89% in Canada, which is among the best countries for retaining biodiversity. So it's not just that we're doing badly, it's that we're doing comparatively badly to other countries with sort of like a similar level of industrialization or the same level of environmental management or regulation. So in terms of your point on COP26, I think Billy's whole story could be described as eye-opening ahead of COP26. My personal opinion is that we have a tendency to view climate change as something that's quite abstract, both in terms of time and place. We sort of think of it as something that's going to happen in the future, or if it is happening, like wildfires around the equator, it's happening, but it's not going to happen here. But I think Billy's research and what Nature Scot have shown is that the climate has already changed here in Scotland, and it's already having disruptive impacts for species and habitats here as well.
Absolutely. Now, for those of you just joining us, if you've just tuned in, we're discussing a major week-long investigation launched by the Herald and the Ferret, taking a look at how green is Scotland. Now, as I've mentioned before, I'm going to continue to plug, the investigation is running all this week in print, and it's also online for Herald subscribers, and you can become one by taking up a £2 for 2-month offer at heraldscotland.com/subscribe. And you can also view it on the Ferret, taking up their offer of £3 for 1 month at theferret.scot/subscribe. Yes, so I guess we move on and we talk about farmland. That was one of the next key issues, and I think you raised it in your sort of introductory point. That has also played quite a key impact on Scotland's nature over the last few decades. And what is it that makes that industry an area of concern?
Yeah, I think that's an important point to point out, is that it's not just climate change that's damaging environments in Scotland. Changes in farmland management over the last 50 years have had a really significant impact on nature. And obviously one of the well-publicised parts of that is the use of fertiliser and pesticides. But other things such as ploughing, crop rotation, livestock numbers have also badly affected soil and water quality in Scotland. And the other thing is that Scotland's land is an important carbon store. So that basically means it stops greenhouse gas emissions that could be causing climate change from entering the atmosphere. It's important to say that the National Farmers Union of Scotland did tell the Ferret it recognises that agriculture needs to take steps to improve biodiversity. And they have said that over 1,000 farmers in Scotland are working on projects which improve soil health, support peatland restoration, which is another thing that keeps carbon locked in the soil, and to deliver agroforestry projects and increase habitats for pollinators like bees, which are obviously really important for the ecosystem. Its spokesperson has called on the Scottish Government to deliver greater action to put in place a post-Brexit agriculture policy, which takes into account some of these environmental needs as well.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Scottish Government there. I guess my next question was going to look at overall, looking at the bigger picture with today's findings. Obviously, these have been put to the Scottish Government. What has their general feeling been? What's the response been from those in charge?
Yeah, I think in fairness, they do recognise that there are the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change facing Scotland, and they do acknowledge the problem, and they've sort of promised to publish a new strategy next year to tackle that biodiversity loss. And obviously, they're saying that they're intertwined, so the biodiversity crisis has been accelerated by climate change itself. They've also pledged to halt the ongoing loss of nature we're seeing in Scotland by 2030 and make significant progress to restoring it by 2045. So it's trying to rebuild some of these habitats, sort of bring the numbers of these animals back up again. And obviously they've released a raft of climate change targets over the last couple of years, which you might be able to read about later in the week if you're interested.
That's good. A good plug. As always, we want people. This is, it is a week-long investigation, so we want to get people to keep coming back. Absolutely. Now, on to the second aspect of this story then, and it was about protected areas in Scotland. If you look on the Herald site, and I'm sure on the Ferret as well, we've listed 7 key sites that have been negatively impacted by climate change. Can you tell me a bit about them, maybe a bit about the impact this has had and what is causing all of this?
Yeah, so as you said, that's a list of probably the most high-profile areas under threat from climate change. So obviously, we said about the bigger list of natural areas that were under threat, but this is probably some of the more high-profile. So the majority of these are protected areas, such as sites of special scientific interest, and they're mostly located in coastal and island regions. So, for example, places particularly affected are the Isle of May and the Bass Rock in the Forth, which is an East Coast boy. He is iconic as well. And obviously with the seabird populations, they're very well known for that. Warming conditions are also impacting upland habitats as well. So Canlochan in northeast Scotland, which is renowned for its alpine heaths, and Ben Wyvis, which is a mountain in east of Ross, were both protected because they're an important habitat for a bird called the dotterel. Basically what that bird does is it nests in the springy moss at the summit of the mountains. So it's very specific habitat it's got. And conditions at the summit have been affected by a change in the number of frost days, again caused by global warming. So because we're getting less frost days at the top of those hills or Munros, essentially the dotterel has less time to nest, and therefore we're seeing less dotterel.
Okay. Now, for those of you listening, we do have posted links in the comment section below. Our wonderful producer has been posting these links below, interactive maps, all that sort of stuff, outlining where these areas are and sort of what the impact is. So if you want to find out more, then feel free to click on those links below, both on the Herald and the Ferret. I guess the last thing from me, we've kept it quite short and sweet, but sometimes that's the best way to do it this time, is to ask if you could give us maybe just a sneak peek of what's coming tomorrow, maybe the rest of the week. Don't want to give too much away, naturally, but if you can give us a sneak peek, that would be great. Yeah,
so tomorrow we've got a day of coverage on air pollution, which is obviously a big health issue as well as an environmental issue. And again, without giving away the headline, as you suggested, we've got estimates that it causes potentially 1,700 premature deaths a year in Scotland. And then across the world, that number could be as high as 7 million a year. So definitely worth getting your Herald and Ferret subscriptions in before then.
Absolutely. Well, what a fantastic plug. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. Thank you for the audience for joining as well. This has been a special live stream looking into our investigation into how green is Scotland. As Paul said, you can take out a subscription to, we'll start with the Ferret. Why not? We can take out a subscription to the Ferret for £3 for 1 month at theferret.scot/subscribe. And of course, you can also take out a subscription to the Herald as well. That's £2 for 2 months, and that's available at heraldscotland.com/subscribe. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to check the links out in the description below for more details on our investigation, and we'll hope to see you again soon.